Oh my gosh. Thursday night. Once again, an hour earlier. I'm going to get to bed before 1 a.m. Life is good. Like, there is joy in the universe. Like, everything has a meaning. Life has purpose. Really, an hour can make all the difference in one's life. And I was sitting here thinking about, like, you know, some of this stuff. And we have a lot of Star Wars to talk about today. But I always try to open up with a little bit of an interesting question for you all. And, you know, like, for those of us joining in the chat, this is going to be a while before we get into Bad Batch. So hold on to your butts for a little bit, okay? So you guys like reality TV? Like,
sure.
are you reality TV people? So Survivor is my favorite, like, reality TV show. Are you guys familiar with Survivor at all? Okay.
Yes.
So it's like, you know, you have to build relationships with people, but ultimately in those relationships with those people and, like, you know, cut them out, but you still have to, like, get them to like you enough to like vote for you at the end to win $1 million. So I want to know in Star Wars, I'm just going to give you like a tribe. You're going to be on a tribe. Okay. And shut up, Miguel, like, back off. Like, you're in the chat already. Of course I like reality. I love Survivor. Like, I have applied for Survivor 5 times. Like, I have applied for five times. I will be applying a 6th this year.
Hey, when you win that mill.
When I win that mill, I'm going to give it all to whoever is in charge of publishing at Star Wars. And it's to be like, here's $1 million. I need all the books before they come out, so I can just know before everyone on these things. That's all I care about. That's all I care about. So anyway, I'm going to give you a try. I'm just going to say that there's 3 people. Of these 3 people, I want to know, like, who would you want in your alliance? Who would you, try to backstab first? And then who do you think you'd want to be with, but wouldn't ultimately able to, like, convince them to be on your side? So I have 3 characters that are on your tribe, and you gotta pick what you're gonna do here. You have C-3PO.
Okay.
You have Mace Windu, and we'll go with Jar Jar Binks. You have to choose one to be in your alliance for the entire game. Like, this is your ride or die. You have to choose one that's like, we need to backstab, this person. Like, we got to blindside them. We got to be able to lie to them and get them, and then one where it's like, I would like to be on this person's side, but I don't think I would actually be able to forge an alliance. So you have Jar Jar, C-3PO, Mace Windu. You're on Survivor. Who is your ride or die of those 3? Brian, who's your ride or die? Like, who's your ride or die alliance here?
Windu.
Windu?
Bar none.
Really?
Yeah. Bar none.
Jay?
It's Windu as well.
What? I thought for sure Mace Windu was going to be like one of the other 2.
No.
Like, I need to elaborate. Why? What makes Mace Windu your ride or die? Because ultimately, I feel like if I was ride or die Mace Windu, I feel like I would get insulted too much, or he would, like, not see any potential in me. And he's like, you're not the chosen one.
I think of all those 3 characters, I think Mace Windu is probably the least annoying. Sorry to, like, C-3PO fans.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry to the Jar Jar Binks people, but
oh no.
The Jar Jar Binks. I'm rolling with Jar Jar.
There's Jar Jar Binks people? What the heck?
No. I'm a Jar Jar Binks person. Do I need to get my Jar Jar Binks action figure in the video for the entire time again?
No, you do not.
Like, do I need to do this? I will if it comes to it, I will. All right, who are you backstabbing first?
Jar Jar.
Jar Jar.
See,
Jar Jar.
He's
getting voted off so damn fast.
You don't understand Survivor. You are backstabbing.
Hang on,
Mace
actually, no. I think I know who I'm backstabbing. I would actually backstab C-3PO. I changed my mind.
There goes Jay killing off normal freaking big name characters again.
Why are we backstabbing 3PO?
Yeah, what the heck?
I think
I don't knock it. I just want to hear why.
Okay, so Mace Windu is the least annoying. C-3PO is probably the most useless. I don't like.
That's fair. Fair. He's probably the most useless. Okay, he's probably not doing. I will say this though. Here's my case for Mace getting backstabbed first. 1, I feel like if I'm sitting in a final tribal council and I have to, like, plead my case of why I deserve $1 million over Mace Windu, the last thing I want to do is have a Jedi sitting next to me. like right there. Like I don't want to be with like tied to this Jedi the whole time. Like I want to get rid of this Jedi as soon as possible. Because if you think about it, do you feel like you have a better chance of beating Jar Jar and 3PO in different competitions and in a battle of wits? Or do you feel like you have a better chance of beating Mace Windu in a battle of like wits or a puzzle or, you know, talking to an audience to convince them that you are number one? Like, I feel like if I'm sitting at the end with Jar Jar, I'm like, you're really going to vote for this guy like over me? Like,
I think that, but I think the thing is like with Mace Windu, everyone's gonna see like how arrogant he is, and he's gonna get too cocky, and then so like the audience isn't gonna actually like vote for him. So I think I'm good. I think I'm good.
Fair enough. That's fair. That's fair. Who you think that the who's the most annoying, Jar Jar or 3PO?
Jar.
Who would be the most annoying?
Jar.
Remember, you have
There's only one right answer. There's only one right answer to that.
I think it's 3PO because
no,
of what
at
Jay
least 3PO.
said.
No, 3PO could be useful. You like grab
Jar
him,
Jar
like, pull
could-
him down and reflect the
feel
sun just right, get fire on your logs off his head. You could have him like talk to the animals, like the Ewoks that are going to come out to try to attack you, and then try to get them to leave you alone. Like
He's also going to give you the odds of how badly you're going to fail when you try to do everything.
Fine. And
Jar
you
Jar
know
could
what?
go
That's
swimming
fine.
and get me back some like fish or something. I could survive. Like 3PO is just going to wander around like, you know, annoying.
Jar Jar's going to be out there like, oh, moi, and he's just going to eat everything. He's not going to bring you back anything.
He's going to go.
Yeah, no.
One
it's
of
not
those? So we have just a handful of quick hitters tonight before we get into the Bad Batch. Just a handful of quick hitters from around the galaxy this week. So the first one, and I want to talk about this because this is Star Wars animation related. Eman Esfandi, Ezra Bridger himself, live action Ezra, tweeted that he's watching through, you know, Resistance right now, the animated show Resistance. And so I want to know, are you guys Resistance, you know, supporters? Have you guys watched Resistance? Did you enjoy it? Or like I'm guessing many people, was it you know, I can't watch Kazuda Xiono accidentally fall into, you know, the ocean one more time, like in season 1. So I'll go Jay. Where are we going with?
I've never seen Resistance.
Never even watched an episode.
No, I'm
What
sorry.
What's kept you from watching? Is it the general like audience that's kind of been like, you don't need to watch it, or is it more of just not as interested in that era, or what is it?
Well, in all honesty, I've never heard anyone really talk about it.
It's not
That's
what
fair.
people. It's not what people mention first when they talk about great Star Wars animation. Probably that's
Right.
for sure.
There's that, and then also too like, I'm not like, I think the animation style is okay. It's just okay, you know, because like I actually, well, I was like a big fan. I actually did enjoy like that animation studio who also did. I think they also did like some mid 2000s Spider-Man show. And I was like, oh, okay, that, you know, that's cool. But again, I was like, that's cool for like that era. I don't know if it's like my animation style nowadays.
Right. I liked season 2 a lot more than season 1 because it felt like we were engaging with the First Order a little bit more, and it kind of gets into that a little bit.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Kylo Ren shows up at the very end, which is kind of fun, but it never feels like a lot of the stakes of what's going on just kind of seem like it doesn't feel like a Resistance show. Like I think the name of the show is a little bit misguided because Resistance makes me feel like we're going to be consistently dealing with, you know, First Order threats or subverting it. And it kind of is, it's a little goofy. It's definitely for like a really young audience, which I have fun with it though. It's certainly fun. I probably won't ever really go back to it again. Brian, what are your thoughts on Resistance?
It was all right for what it was. I agree with you. It had nothing to do with the Resistance. Leia popped up once in a while. Poe popped up once in a while. BB-8 was honestly the most consistent Resistance member in that entire show. But it was supposed to go 3 seasons. We only got to 2. They canceled it after 2. I think had it got its 3rd season, maybe, you know, but I also said the same thing about sequel films. And I was like, wait till the 3rd one comes out and it'll make sense. And I was like, you know, but
Brian, I'm gonna hold on.
So,
We don't need to fight over the
no,
sequel films tonight,
but,
Brian.
like, as far as the animation style goes, it was that weird, like 2D, 3D kind of thing. Like it was 3D, 2D characters, you know, 2D characters in a 3D world kind of thing. And it was kind of different, but it didn't throw me off that much. It was a show that I watched every episode of it, hoping that eventually I would be like, okay, I understand the purpose of this show. Never understood the purpose of it. I never understood why the show even existed.
So the only thing that was interesting about some of this rebel resistance stuff is that in Ahsoka, we see Senator Ziono in the Ahsoka show, and we just see how, big of a like grade A hole he is, because he's just an absolute jerk. And you kind of get the vibes that he's a jerk from Resistance with the way Kaz talks about him. But there's like that moment in season 1 where Kaz thinks his dad and his family died in the destruction of the Republic. And then we find out that Ziono wasn't even around at that time. He somehow made it off in time. So I think he's a First Order spy. And, honestly, Kaz, thought his dad died. You're not missing out on much. Dude's a clown. Like, your father sucks. Like, dude had the audacity to question General Harrison Dula. Get off my lawn. So the next thing we're going to talk about, and I'll pull this up here. We got some new action figures this week. And for the Legends fans out there, you're gonna love these. We have like obviously a new Luke Skywalker, but then describing this to people who have never really followed Star Wars Legends at all and telling them about how there is an evil clone of Luke called Luke with two U's, like Luke, and like there's
Luke,
there's tell your uncle, make sure it speaks Bocce.
Tell Uncle Owen.
Make sure it speaks Bocce. It's like, but I wanted to go in town and buy some power converters. Like, dude, oh my gosh. Normal Luke is the whiniest little son of a gun in the new one. Oh my gosh.
Like father, like son.
Anyway, but Luke is an evil clone, made of Luke. So I want to know, and they also had, action figures for Mara Jade, which is also a fan favorite from Legends, and one for Joris Seaboth or Kaboth or whatever his name is. Dude's the old man with the giant beard with the ripped 6-pack or 8-pack or whatever he has. And I'm like, I want to be
embodied the 90s action figures. Just
when I'm 80 years old, I hope I have the bod of Joris Seaboth walking around shredded,
Guy
like that when I'm
chiseled.
80 years old. But
guy looked like a Michelangelo sculpture.
What did you? Are you guys gonna? Are you guys gonna grab any of these? I know you guys both are collectors, so are you gonna grab any of these action figures, pre-order them, or just kind of that's nice, waiting for something else?
It's neat. It's cool that they're doing some Legend stuff. I wish, and as I'm a canon junkie, so it's weird for me. It might be weird to hear me say this. I wish they would keep doing Legend stories more than I do Legends action figures. I wish they would let people just keep going with some of those storylines from Legends and just keep it marked as Legends, that way. Like
Essential Legends, like when they're redoing these covers right now.
Yeah, and just put out some new stuff for the Legends fans because there's a market for it. There's an audience. I would rather see that than the action figures. The figures are cool, but
interesting.
Interesting.
So that's interesting you say that. Jay, what about you? I have a response for you, Brian.
No, actually, I totally agree with Brian, actually. There's some great Legends books. There's obviously like the Darth Bane trilogy. There's some I'd love for them to continue even like the Star Wars The Old Republic stuff.
I love Plagueis.
Plagueis is a good one.
One?
Oh, I haven't actually read that one. I am, what's funny is I'm currently making my way through the Heir to the Empire trilogy.
Right.
And, so like seeing these
you're definitely buying these action figures then, right, Jay? Like you're in the middle of it. Like this is the target audience. Come on now.
Okay, so
what's $20 for a hardcore Legends fan?
Is it okay? How much is it actually? I never even.
I think they're like the standard, like probably like $16 to $25, probably like depending on the size.
It's a 4-pack. It's a 4-pack of figures.
Yeah, you can't buy them separately. You got to buy them all together.
I think you have to buy the 4-pack. Yeah.
Where's the point one? The situation has just gotten.
It's probably going to be upwards of 100.
The situation has just gotten more complicated.
So if that's the case,
this deal's getting worse all the time.
If that's the case, nah, it's not a buy.
I single-handedly changed his mind. Like, that was great.
So we're not buying these, but that brings up something I want to ask you though, because we've been on this show several times talking about how we want, people we want more action figures. We want them to be marketing these toys differently. But, and I think that they've done that over the last couple of weeks, but we don't sound like I want like a clarification here. Are you, it's there's a difference to me between like, oh, I'm not gonna buy those, but I'm like really glad they're doing it, or I don't really care that these are here. But I just kind of want like, where's your line here? Are you excited about them like exploring some of these action figures, or is it more you wish they were putting this towards other things, or what is it?
Well,
No, I'm definitely glad. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Jay. Like we were talking about before we went live, they were doing expanded universe action figures back in the 90s with Shadows of the Empire and the Thrawn trilogy and stuff like that. There was toys for those.
Okay.
They like I told you guys, they had the Chewbacca action figure, the bounty hunter Chewbacca with the flat top, looked like Gozer.
Absolutely.
And like, yeah, and so they used to do that back in the day, and it was awesome.
Do you still have some of those?
I do. I've got my Chewbacca's. I'll have to pull it out for next week. But
that's
how I got my Leia and Bausch disguise. I never could find the Return of the Jedi version. I got the Shadows of the Empire version. Same figure, just different. It was a purple card. But no, they did a lot of stuff like that back then. Like the box actually looked like the book, and you would open the book, and there's all the micro machines inside of it and stuff. It was pretty cool. The 90s were lit for Star Wars toys. Just saying. But no, I think there's a market for this too. Honestly, there's people who are hardcore Legends fans who they're out there, the people who renounce anything new that that's coming out in Star Wars. Give them some action figures, you know what I mean? I'm just saying, give them some toys to play with.
Take their money, maybe they'll shut up for a little bit.
We're not giving them any new stories
because there's such a difference between being critical of Disney Star Wars and then just from the get-go there were people that were like, I'm not doing this, not doing this because you
not even gonna
like there's such a big difference between the two. The latter drives me insane. So anyways, before we go down that rabbit hole, did you guys know that The Living Force is coming out very soon? And the review for Star Wars Newsnet has dropped. Our own Nate Manning has dropped his review. And I read it this week. And honestly, I must say, I was a little surprised with the way what he was saying about it, but it makes sense given what he was saying, and I'm really excited for it. He says, and I don't know if you guys got a chance to read Nate's review yet, but for those in the audience tonight, and the 171 tuning in so far, 172. So basically, let me set the stage. Basically, the Jedi are almost in pairs going on this mission that is described by Nate as being kind of like the last great act by the Jedi Council, in a sense, before like you see kind of the dark descent of the prequel era. And he says it doesn't necessarily always build to this. It's kind of slow at times and is like really kind of building a world here with the Jedi Council. And it doesn't necessarily give the big returns always that you're wanting from a story, but you're never frustrated in terms of how endearing it is. Like it's very endearing. You love these characters. You truly cherish the journey. And if you enjoy some of the smaller moments between Jedi, that this is definitely a book for you. And he also said, and I thought this was really important, and Brian, we talked about this on the timeline show that we just got done recording, that it's important to see these Jedi in an area and in a story where they're still the heroes, that it's like the Jedi are capable of being the heroes. Like they're flawed, and we've gotten a lot of those stories. And then the Acolyte coming out, we're going to get more stories of like why the Jedi are going to ultimately fall. But it's important to still know that like the Jedi are capable of being heroic figures, and we should appreciate that. And despite their flaws, like they're still capable of this. And so I think that he said this story is almost like he said the last great act of them coming together to do one last great thing and show that who the Jedi are supposed to be before ultimately what happens in the prequels. So are you guys grabbing a copy of this book by John Jackson Miller? Like, have you already pre-ordered it? I want to know, like, did this quick synopsis, does that make you more interested? And if we have any book people in the chat, let me know, like, are you going to grab a copy of this one? Jay, what about you?
Oh, no, I was definitely excited even before the review. I mean, John Jackson Miller, he's obviously a big name within the Star Wars literary world. And so right away, I mean, when everyone announced, when Lucasfilm Publishing announced that book and that John Jackson Miller was coming back to write something like this, it was really exciting, I think that I haven't actually had a chance to read Nate's review yet.
Brian's like, I got a copy.
I was like,
I've read it. What?
No, I do. I will be pre-ordering that at Barnes and Noble for the exclusive like poster and stuff like that.
Oh,
but
those
honestly,
so
like,
cool.
Yeah, no, it looks really great, right? And like, the cover looks really great and
Hmm.
everything too. So that makes me like hearing what you were that quote from Nate is actually really exciting. Absolutely.
Okay, Brian, what about you?
I'm totally picking this up. I cannot wait for this book. I love John Jackson Miller. Like, so I got to interview him on my show several years ago, and he was such a cool author. He was so
Okay,
cool and such a Star
awesome.
Wars fan. Like, I messaged him on Facebook of all places. Just randomly, I was at work one day and I was like, "Hey," and I sent it was basically a copy and paste message that I sent to a bunch of different people, and he was the first one to answer within like minutes, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm free
Wow.
tonight. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh crap, I was expecting in like 2 weeks, but yeah, we can do tonight. That's
He
fine."
says, "I'm free tonight."
And
You're
so
like,
I'm like
"Change my
throwing
plans."
questions together, but yeah, he was so cool, and what I like about it, like, because we were even talking about, obviously he did A New Dawn, which is the first uh canon novel that they came out with in 2014. He kind of was the one that kicked off all the new canon stuff, the novels. But he also had a story and I know people are not a fan of this planet. The Canto Bite. There was a Canto Bite
Mhm.
novelette that had like four longer
Okay,
stories in it. He did one of them called The Ride, and it was by far the best story in that book. Buy that book just to read that story.
okay.
It was so good. But anyway, and I talked to him. I talked to Zeroff about The Ride, and it felt like he was surprised that I was talking about it because it was like an under the radar kind of project
Right.
for him, and I was like, no, I absolutely adore that story. It was so good. Um, but anyway, no, I can't wait to read this, man. I love his take on Star Wars.
Mhm.
I haven't read a whole lot of the EU stuff, but I did read the Lost Tribes of the Sith. So like a lot of his stuff that he
Mhm.
did back in the way back in Old Republic stuff. Really cool. So I'm dying to see what he can do
It'll be a
with
nice change of
the
pace
Jedi Council.
before some of the like really hard hitting High Republic
Yeah.
books come out this summer. Like Temptation of the Force comes out in June, and that's going to be probably a really heavy. There's going to be some heavy stuff that happens in that book, I'm sure. And so I think it's going to be a nice change of pace to have something like that is kind of this. We know how the prequel era ends, but it's going to be kind of an uplifting story, seeing the Jedi perform something important. And it's just a reminder that like every act matters. Just because the Jedi fall to
Mm-hmm.
the Empire, like what they do here, it matters just in life in general. What you do matters. It's a good story. And so that leads us into the main discussion for the evening. That's all the quick hitters I have. It wasn't a heavy week of Star Wars news. So we had kind of a massive episode of the Bad Batch that dropped this week, I guess you could say, with Asajj Ventress making her return into Star Wars animation. And, there she is right there with the yellow lightsaber and the new haircut and everything. I guess, is it a new haircut or just her having hair is like
It's
different? I guess.
yeah.
Like if
It's the
someone who
haircut she
doesn't
had in
have
Dark
hair,
Disciple.
if someone who doesn't have hair suddenly has hair, do you say I like the new haircut, or like what do you say in that instance?
It's a legitimate question.
Like what do we
I
do in the
don't.
chat? If you are friends with a bald person and then you see the bald person later and they have hair, like do you
Oh
say
my
like
god.
nice haircut? Do you say nice hair? Like like what is the appropriate response if
Hair.
interest shows up? Anyway, I want to know what do you guys think? And Jay, obviously, your review made some waves on our site this week, and so and I know that I think we have slightly. I don't completely disagree with you. I want to be upfront. I don't
Oh,
completely disagree with you on some of it, but there is a. I love your new hair. Miguel's so nice. He's just like nice look. Okay, and then Miguel's like a tool, I guess, right there. He's like nice. I was just like, Miguel's so nice. He's like, nice look. And then he goes, love the implants. And I'm like, okay, like what a jerk. Can't wait till Miguel's on here too. We can make fun of him for something else. Poor Miguel is trash people. So anyway, sorry, Jay, but your review was really well written.
oh, thank you.
Although I don't necessarily agree with some of the stuff in there. We'll talk about it and we'll
Sure.
flesh it all
Yeah.
out. But it was extremely well written. So I think that I just want to encourage you also. I know that, when people come and they might attack you or something for that, like always just, go with your gut. Go with your gut. Like tonight we're going to go with our gut and we're going to talk about it. And Brian, we haven't even talked at all about the episode,
Yeah. No.
yet. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. But before we get into it, just a quick ask, if you could get on YouTube and like and subscribe the channel, but also blast the channel, wherever you're, watching, whatever you're, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is, like put the link out there. So we can get as many people in here as we can. Also, Brian and I just got finished recording our weekly podcast and show on YouTube called The Timeline Show. We went into the year 382 BBY still, and we're almost done with the year. And that's our show where we go in through every single canon story in Star Wars. And so this week we're talking about the book Cataclysm. And the book Cataclysm, Jay, I said is my favorite Star Wars book of all time. It is my favorite Star Wars book of all time. That's we talked about that one this week. So we're going to be doing that. Check that out. But now it's time for the Bad Batch. And Brian, I know Jay's thoughts on this already. So, and Jay's review is up. So I want to give him like a platform to kind of share kind of what his thoughts are, because I think his thoughts are going to be a little bit different than some of ours. So I'm going to kind of platform is yours, Jay. Just in a brief synopsis, kind of give some of your gripes with this one.
So first off, I want to say, like, I wanted to really like this episode. Like, this was a big one. This is like the moment that all of us were waiting for when we first saw that trailer. And, like, when I watched it, I was a bit disappointed after having finished that episode. And again, like you said, my review is up on the website. You can go ahead and go check it out for like some of my thoughts. I'll be happy to like provide like even more bigger like explanation of it here. But for me, I think for me is that it didn't live up to my hopes and expectations of what I wanted from the character, because this is a character that a lot of people, we all love. We here really love this character, and like some of us have read like Dark Disciple and like are big fans of that book. But when you bring a character back like that, and when you have them come and make a return, it has to feel triumphant. It has to feel big. It has to feel momentous, especially if this character is going to move forward and there's going to be more of this character later on. Right. There has to be like a big thing of like, okay, I see why this character is so beloved. There's a lot that there has to be a lot revealed and shown about the character to make you go like, oh, okay, this character means a lot to people. For me, I think like when Ahsoka first appeared in like The Mandalorian season 2, that's a good example of like how you bring a character back and make it feel powerful and impactful. For me, when I was watching this episode, Asajj Ventress, I feel like the main focus was still on the Bad Batch, which I think for an episode like this, I think they should have focused more on Asajj Ventress. I bring this up in my review as well, but like, how is she back? Where is she in terms of like the Force? Is she still like a Sith? Is she still like a Jedi? Obviously, we know like she's more along like the middle and it's more of a bounty hunter. But I think there were some of those moments where I want to know what happened with this character. And, everyone keeps saying like, oh, just be patient, just wait. It's a little bit of a slow burn. I know for a lot of people though with Star Wars, they're kind of tired of like this kind of constantly punting the football down the field and saying, no, just wait, hold on, there's more to come. Because
can you give a couple of examples of that besides just this, like the Bad Batch necessarily, for how you feel?
So, The Mandalorian and the whole cloning aspects, getting to that part, even with Ahsoka, there were a lot of seeds planted in Ahsoka where you're just like, oh, you gotta wait for the next season. And that can be a little bit disappointing, especially when there are parts of the season where you're like, why are we focusing on this aspect so much? When, I want to see more of this aspect. For example, like in Ahsoka, they had the Mortis gods teased at the end of season 1. That's cool and everything, but, like, I would have liked that more than, say, like the Sabine plot point where, she's learning to become a Jedi. That's cool and everything, but I think that there's a lot that I'm just a little bit, like, and I think, like a lot of people are feeling this way too, especially towards these long series. These long series that have like part 1, part 2, you got to go watch this, that, like Marvel is like that. A lot of people feel that way about Marvel. So for me, I think that I'm starting to feel a little bit of that fatigue, and I know like I'm not the only one. If you know, if people are listening to this now and are watching this on YouTube, if you feel this like the exact opposite, great. You know, I have totally nothing against you, but I do know like there are a lot of people who do, you know, feel this
Right.
way. Yeah. Miguel in the chat says example the Mandalorian episode 1 and Grogu's appearance. That's a good one, actually. You know, we actually did never found out how Grogu got there, and you know, we still don't really even really know where what exactly it makes Grogu so special. We know somewhat of that. You know, we've been like spoon fed some of that here and there, but it's like, do I really have to come back again next week? Okay,
Right.
you know, hopefully this week is gonna be the episode, right?
Okay.
And I think that like that's sort of like my sentiment towards all of that.
Okay. So I have a question for you because I
Yeah.
thought that the way that they introduced Ventress in this episode was pretty flawless. If we had not seen her in the trailer and they
Yeah.
hadn't have basically flat
Yeah.
out told us that she was going to be like in the show, like if we had for the Mandalorian season 2, if Ahsoka was in the trailer for Mandalorian season 2 and then the week before that Ahsoka came on, like they were blasting her all over the place that she was going to be there. Like obviously they name dropped her and we knew she was coming, but it's not like we had seen her in the trailer and we have known for, you know, what we're like, you know, 2 months in since the trailer now. So like we've known for 2 months that, you know, by seeing her in that trailer that she was going to be in it, that maybe if it was a surprise and we didn't know she was coming and Omega's walking down there and we're like, who's she going to talk to? And suddenly Asajj Ventress walks out. It might have, I think that would kind of handle some of what you're talking about because it would have had the shock factor and you're like, oh, this is like a mentor for Omega. And I think that if we are looking at this episode from that lens, I think that Ventress being in this episode and the way they handled it was really, really good. It was different than I think most people's expectation, but I think seeing this side of Ventress and then having the focus of the episode be on, you know, Sabine. I just saw Miguel's thing about Sabine. I think the focus of this episode being on Ventress has changed quite a bit. We don't know how, but we're exploring this new side of her and through her compassion and care for Omega. Like I was pretty good with that. And then also I think that we actually got a lot of answers in this episode, and we can talk about that in a little bit. I think we got a lot of answers in this episode. And I want to throw it to Brian here, man, but let's go through and just catch up on, you know, some of our chats real quick. Like, man, like you guys talked about the Mandalorian episode 1 and Grogu's appearance, and Miguel further was saying how one of his biggest disappointments with Mando's season 1 was that they didn't answer most of the Grogu related questions. And then when they got some of those questions later, it was super quick. And, you know, I agree 100%. This is the way said 10 out of 10 episode. I know people who read the book are upset, which proves my Bad Batch prediction number 2, that people will be upset about Dark Disciple for, you know, little to no reason right now. And but I love Jedi, and Ventress is like top 20 of all time. It wasn't perfect, but OMG Ventress was top notch. I do love Asajj Ventress. And then just to catch up, agree with Javis Cameron, share some of the sentiment. When done correctly, these teases can be very fulfilling down the line. I'm a big tease guy. I love the slow burn. Like I think we live in an era where we're used to binge watching some of these things. And I think, for instance, like I'm watching through like Star Trek The Next Generation right now, and there's 27 episodes in a season, and those used to come out like on a week-to-week basis. And those are episodic storytelling. So it's not like they're always, you know, building on one narrative plot. But at the same time, I think some of like what we've become conditioned to is these 6 to 8 episode series, like in seasons, where we expect every episode to have some sort of major plot point, because if we don't, you know, get that, then it's like, oh, we feel shortchanged. But like in Ahsoka season 2, but like Clone Wars, like the last season of Clone Wars, there was like that whole 4 episodes where Ahsoka's just with the, you know, Martez sisters, and Martell sisters, and people had a problem with that and didn't like that. But ultimately helped build into the Siege of Mandalore arc, which was great. I would love to talk more about the Sabine story in Ahsoka, because I'm on Miguel's side there. I really liked that and wanted less of I don't even need the Mortis stuff at all. Like I honestly, but that's like we could talk about the Ahsoka show, I think, a whole nother day. But Brian, let's throw it to you real quick after we do this last one. He's like, I agree, Grogu episode is hilarious. Why is the most important M count being in the Mandoverse with the biggest bounty in the verse shoved in a corner with a rag over an egg looking contraption? They do kind of gloss over that for an entire season. It just becomes about protecting him. But so Brian, what is your take on all of this? Do you feel like Ventress's episode was a little bit underserved for this character? She should have been more at the forefront. We should have got a little bit more information on her and more of the plot of the story progressing, or are you kind of leaning the other way? Do you find yourself in the middle? Where did you kind of lean after watching the episode?
So first off, I agree with you. I don't think they should have put Ventress in the trailer at all. I don't think she should have been in that trailer one bit, because I mean, look at what happened. Everybody's throwing their copies of Dark Disciple away. They're getting pissed off, saying, canon doesn't matter anymore, to the point where they have to come out and say, no, we are going to honor that book. It is going to make sense once we get there. So
we have to issue a PR statement.
Right. And so I don't think they should have put her in the trailer at all. There could have been, I'm sure we're going to finish this season and be like, that moment should have been the big moment in the trailer instead of Ventress, right? Especially if she's only in it for this one episode. She didn't need to be in the trailer at all, right?
Right.
That's my first point. The second point is, with the Bad Batch, the show is from their point of view. They don't know the story of Dark Disciple. They don't know what happened to Ventress in the past. To them, it doesn't, it makes perfect sense that she's standing there. They don't know that she died, right? So from a certain point of view, from the Bad Batch's point of view, I think it makes a lot of sense for their story that she be the one to pop up. Plus, you need a bounty hunter that, is hunting M count, targets, and what better bounty hunter than to hunt M count targets,
knows about it, right?
Right. And so it makes sense to bring Ventress back. They've also said, they're going to explain how she came back in future storytelling. So there's more Ventress coming that's going to end up explaining this. And
but I think that speaks to some of Jay's point about, like, we now are having to wait even longer to even know why she's there.
But at the same time, we've talked about on this show before, Star Wars is meant to be viewed chronologically, And so when you go back, and when future generations go back and watch it chronologically and read it chronologically, when they watch the timeline show, Tyler, and we sit down and they go through every single thing. Or listen,
you can find us on Apple and Spotify as well.
Yeah, I mean, just shameless plug. They'll be able to see this as we go, right, bit by bit. And they're going to, read Dark Disciple, and then they're probably going to get an episode of Tales of the Sith or something down the line where she comes back, or Tales of the, something where she comes back. And then you see this episode of Bad Batch, and it's going to feel organic at that point. Right now, yeah, it feels disjointed and weird. But at the same time, it's like we had the same thing with with the original trilogy and the prequels. Like, you get this big thing where it's like, oh, Darth Vader's Luke's father? What the hell? And then you get this exposition dump by Obi-Wan that, that's like, oh, I'm sorry, I was lying, but I wasn't lying. I was telling you my truth. Like, and so then you got to wait to go see that story, and it's like, I get where Jay's coming from, and I totally understand the whole kick in the can further down the road. We'll deal with it when we get to it. I totally understand that being frustrating. Because, like you said, we live in an age now where instant gratification is a huge thing. When we order something on Amazon, it's going to be here in 2 days. We binge watch entire seasons of shows. Nothing is weekly like it used to be. Nothing is serial the way it used to be. And also, you got to look at the story too. Like some of the stuff with Mandalorian, with some slow parts in there, and whatnot. If you took, let's say, The Empire Strikes Back, the film, right? And you have enough there to make like 3 episodes based off of, Disney's standard for their TV shows. You could split The Empire Strikes Back into 3, maybe 4 episodes. And there's going to be a couple of boring episodes in there, but overall that makes an amazing story as a film when you watch it all together. You know what I mean? And so I think instead of looking at these TV shows as individual episodes, those are parts of a larger story. We need to look at that larger story instead of just the single parts of it. But yeah, I understand where Jay's coming from on a lot of it. But I think I'm at a point in my life, personally. I mean, I'm 10 years older than you guys. I'm at a point in my life where I'm not saying you guys aren't, but I'm patient enough to sit down and be like, hey, you know what? Let's wait a few years. Let's see what comes out. I survived the wait, between the end of Rebels season 4 and Ahsoka to trying to figure out what happened with Ezra and Thrawn. I finally ended up getting it, and it paid off.
Right.
Let's take that long journey again and just kind of wait and ride it out and wait for the day when a trailer drops. And we're like, we're getting it. We're finally going to figure it, find out.
But I think too, part of what Jay's point is they've talked about how this is the final season of Bad Batch. Like this is the final season. And we got 6 episodes, I believe, left, something like that. 6 or 7 episodes left. 6 maybe, we'll just say that. And there's a lot of ground to cover in 6 episodes of 25 minutes of storytelling each week. So how in this one, I would be curious to ask Jay, because I felt like they answered a lot of plot questions in this episode.
I feel like
I thought that they answered a lot of plot questions and moved it along. So my question to you would be more like, where do you think they dropped the ball on that, and where do you think you didn't get what you were hoping for? And then perhaps Brad or I could like pop in and be like, well, this is why I feel like they did answer some of those. But I'd be curious.
So that's an interesting point, Tyler, because in my review, I pointed how I felt like this story kind of just, with Ventress and in this episode, the story kind of just revolved or went back to point 1, where it's like, oh, okay, so why is Omega so special? That's been like the big question since the beginning. And I want to ask you guys, because like there were some comments and people who gave feedback on our website who were saying that, because I interpreted it differently, the scene where Ventress is talking to Hunter and Wrecker, or Hunter and Crosshair, and Ventress says, she doesn't have a high M count.
Not from what I've seen, basically.
Yeah, and then so Hunter is saying though that she's lying. So the full thing she says is like, Omega doesn't have a high M count, and that she doesn't know why the Empire is hunting Omega. I believe like that's like around the lines of like
it's the gist. It's the gist, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask you guys, because some people interpreted that line as being like Omega actually does have a high M count. It's that she just doesn't have any training. Did you guys interpret it that way?
I think this is one of those things where it's Ventress's point of view. It's kind of like in Rebels when Obi-Wan, after him and Maul have that kind of like pseudo duel out in the desert, and then Maul says, is he the chosen one? Talking about Luke, and Obi-Wan's like, he is. That's Obi-Wan. That's how Obi-Wan sees it. That's his point. That doesn't mean Luke Skywalker is the chosen one. It just means that that's what Obi-Wan kind of feels, right? And I think that's kind of what's going on here with Ventress a little bit, because she also alluded to the fact that she does have a high M count, and I could take her with me, but you guys, she's safer with you guys. You know what I'm saying? So I think it was one of those things she was doing. She was saying it more out of protection for Omega and for her well-being than it was anything else. It's kind of, that's what I gathered out of it.
So Omega was around, and she is like, so am I like a Jedi? Am I have a high M count? She's like, not from what I've seen, and if you did, it would take a lot of training anyway. And then she kind of sends her on her way, and that's when Crosshair's like, you're lying. And she basically, we lost Jay for a moment.
There he is.
Oh no, I'm still here. Sorry.
Okay. And so he, says you're lying, and that's when Ventress, I think she was like, let's get her out of the way, because it's like she's so young, like I don't want to burden her with anything else I'm going to say. And then he's like, you're lying, and then she goes, about what? And she's very vague, but I think she answers the question when she says, if she did, she would have to need so much training. She would need to be separated from you guys, and she would have to, be away from you all. And I think the implication there is that maybe she does, maybe she doesn't, but whatever about her is special, she's going to need to be separated from her brothers for her to ultimately be safe. And I think it's alluding to the end game of the show, which is ultimately they're going to have to give up Omega, not like give up to the Empire, but they're going to have to give up on having to be these like helicopter parents that are over her all the time. And I think I think they try to like make that even more apparent, like when they're watching her on the binoculars
Yeah,
while she's
right.
training, when they're standing right behind her while she's trying to
Right.
balance and cheering her on, and then as soon as she leaves, they're like, all right, now we're gonna fight Ventress because she's bad. Like they refuse to almost let her go off and do her own thing until she basically says, I got rid of them, no distractions today. And so I think what she's alluding to is that, like, you know, this training that she would have to require would take her away from you all. And they're so rejective of that. But ultimately, whether it's an M count thing or something else, I think now I would actually, I think I lean that she's more force sensitive, which I didn't before. I thought it was just, she was, I think she was just compatible to being like able to take M count blood. But now, based off of what Ventress was saying in that conversation, I was like, oh, like she is force sensitive, and that she's alluding to the fact that she's gonna have to leave if she wants to get trained in some way. And the last thing is that moved the plot around too, was her saying what we've kind of known all along, is that they are not nearly as safe on Pabu as they think. She found them very easily. I think we're gonna see like a bunch of bounty hunters, because we know Cad Bane and others are going to show up in this show, and we could see, you know, some of them showing up to take her on, to take Omega, and eventually that, you know, they're going to have to leave. So I think it does move it along quite a bit, from the sense of Ventress talking about Omega's M count, telling them that Pabu is not safe for you. You need to leave like right now. And then also giving us just also mixing in the really cool backstory with Ventress and what happens in the ocean and all of that stuff. Brian, what are you thinking? I know you got something to say.
No, I was going back to the Ventress thing. You know, she could be protecting Omega too. I mean, look at Ventress and everything she's gone through since she was Omega's age. You know, we've learned from other stuff. You know, she was a Jedi Padawan at one point. You know, and that, you know, we see how Dooku treated her. You know, as the Sith assassin, and then.
Right.
You know, and being rejected, you know, by them, and, you know, becoming the bounty hunter, and then getting killed off and then brought back, you know, and then, you know, and this is where she's at now. And maybe she doesn't want that for Omega, you know, and that's why she's telling her, no, I'm sorry, there's no hope for you, you know, like there's nothing there. Doesn't want the same mistakes, you know, the same things to end up happening to her, especially in a time, because she told them how dangerous the Empire is. She made it very, very clear the Empire is incredibly dangerous. You know, and to go through everything in Ventress's mind, for Omega to go through everything she did, but with that looming Empire over everything at the same time, it's her protecting Omega.
Not ready for the burden, were you?
Yeah,
like Yoda. That's kind of what I would lean as well. Jay, what do you think? What is your? And then we can talk about some of the other finer points of the episode.
No, I mean, you guys bring up good points. I didn't really think about that, because she's very cryptic, right? And you have to really like pay close attention, and even then it's not concrete solid whether or not, again, you know, like Crosshair asked her, you're lying, and then Ventress is like saying about what parts. So like, yeah, it's I think you guys have altered you know, like my opinion on that part. It does move. It does move, you know, the story. It moves. It does move the plot, and I see what you guys are saying, that it does actually, you know, advance the plot in a direction to where I see, like, okay, you know, that's where it's gonna end. Yeah, I mean, I still think my initial thoughts, though, like for me, the big thing was the Ventress reveal. If we could go back to that, like, I agree with all of you guys and think that they shouldn't have showed that off in the trailers.
If she's not in the trailer, you probably are gonna be like, "Oh, wow, she steps out the shadows. It's Asajj Ventress." Versus we've been, you know, waiting for her to show up for, you know, 2 months now.
Yeah, and then it built up like a whole lot of expectations and questions that the episode didn't answer too much. Not, you know, it provided some answers, but it didn't like go full depth like I wanted it to, right?
I think we'll get that, but it's like, I think Brian said earlier, like, it is the Bad Batch's story right now, and right now we know enough about Asajj to know that, okay, she's changed. So for instance, when they fight the monster in the water, and, you know, she chooses to soothe the monster and relax the monster instead of like lashing out and trying to control it and destroy it. It was more of a nod to like I'm gonna peace, like serenity, and something we haven't seen from Massage Ventress in animation before.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was like an interesting point, like even for Omega to watch. And can we talk for a moment too about how much Omega like loved Asajj Ventress even after she learned that Asajj Ventress was a war criminal? Like she
Right.
learns Asajj is like a war criminal, and
Well,
it's like, oh
technically,
my
so
gosh.
is Anakin and Obi-Wan, but
Right.
that's another discussion.
But she's like, oh, they're like Omega, she's done all these horrible things. Like starts reading them off. Omega's like,
so?
I want to be her friend so bad. And Crosshair's like, you're so naive. She's like, I didn't give up on you, did I? And then he's like,
The look on his face when she says that, you can see the oh crap.
like this freaking
like
kid.
you wanted to
got
say
me.
something. Yeah.
This freaking kid. Brian, what were you gonna say?
Let me ask you guys this, because I think it's a question that needs to start being asked. Are we at a point again where we look back when I was, growing up for TV shows, when there's a new season coming out, we didn't get trailers for TV seasons or for TV shows. We did for movies, obviously, but we didn't get, a new TV show coming out. There was, maybe a TV spot, saying this is coming out, but it wasn't a whole full-on trailer.
Okay.
Are we at a point where maybe they need to start going easier on trailers and just start dropping shows without these teases?
It depends on it entirely depends on what they're putting into these
Yeah.
teases. Because, for instance,
Yeah.
you go see certain Star Wars, like you go see the Force Awakens trailers and TV
Yeah.
spots from when that came out. Perfect. You don't know really anything that's going
Right.
on for the most part,
Right.
but you see little great clips in action. I think I guess the Ahsoka trailer I thought was really, solid. Like we get an idea of what's going
Yeah.
on, but we don't know. A lot of the Mandalorian trailers have been like that without, some of those things. But I think with this one, they dropped the ball and maybe gave us too much because they dropped in, here's Finnick, here's Cad Bane, here's Ventress.
Mhm.
But
Right.
they kind of told us, I don't like it when you get the whole story, and they didn't show us the whole
Right.
story.
That's
But I don't
yeah.
want to see some of these bigger things in a trailer. Like,
Yeah.
I want that to happen. So it just depends on what they do. I think Star Wars, for the most part, has always been really good with trailers. I think that's
I
like one
agree.
of the strengths of Star Wars. So I don't want to say we're past that with Star Wars, because I think maybe this was just one blip in the radar that'll go away.
Right.
I think
Right.
maybe a good indicator might be, since we don't know anything that's going to happen in the Acolyte,
Yeah.
because it's something completely different. I wonder if maybe that would be a good barometer to see what their approach is with the trailers for that. Like, how much are they showing us
How
in
much are
that
they showing?
trailer? And we
Well,
watch the
see-
show, it might be like, oh man, we saw
well-
this person do this.
Well, like with Ahsoka, remember we were like 4 episodes in, and we're like, oh, that's all the trailer footage. You remember we were like, there's only like 1 or 2 shots left that we haven't seen
Mhm.
of Thrawn and of whatnot.
Yeah.
And so maybe I feel like maybe trailers need to just start limiting,
should.
really
They do.
like just a couple few episodes
Mhm.
in, because if with Star Wars, all of these seasons, all the big stuff, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger toward the end, or at least it's meant to. That's the intention for the build of this big climax. Maybe not show a whole lot of that, just kind of show a little bit of the build up.
Mhm.
The other thing I want to add a little bit to that, and this is a little bit of a different subject, but I think it ties in with this.
Okay.
I think, Tyler, we were talking about how like shows aren't serialized anymore. It's not like a weekly thing where we're used to even the binge watch or the shorter 6 to 8 episode seasons. I'm curious, like if Star Wars is at a point too where they should actually start just releasing these episodes all at one time and just let people watch it chronologically, like you guys said. Because I
Here's
think
the
like
problem with that though. Oh,
Okay,
go
go
sorry.
ahead.
Sorry. Finish what you're saying. Finish what you're saying.
No. So because I felt that way about Ahsoka, which is like you watch one episode and it's like, especially if it was like a short one, like
Mhm.
35, 40 minutes, you wait a week and then you're like, oh, I gotta wait another week for this, for like the answers to come out. I'm starting to get to the point where, yeah, I think that they should release these episodes all at one time. Let us just sit down and watch it all. and maybe even let it be shorter seasons, because I think there are a lot of other shows. The thing is, TV landscape right now is so dense. There's so much to watch.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, if one show doesn't really respect your, not saying that the Bad Batch doesn't respect your time or anything, but if, like, like for certain audiences thinking like, oh, I gotta keep on coming back and back, they might just switch off and just say, you know what, I'm gonna watch something else already.
So I have a lot to say on that,
Yeah, go
because
ahead.
I understand that. I really do. But what becomes lost, I think, with the quick binge watching method is, for instance, if you had watched season 2 of Mandalorian, they drop season 2 of Mandalorian, they give you all the episodes. All you're going to talk about is Luke Skywalker. That's all the discourse to me on Luke Skywalker and the what are the droids called? Oh my gosh.
The Dark Troopers?
The Dark Troopers. It's pretty much that's all the discourse is going to be on that. And it's not going to be for maybe longer time after that we're going to talk about the episode where they go to Tatooine, like the first episode with Cobb Vanth, which is so freaking cool. And you get Cobb Vanth, and that's just a great 1 hour of television. And then, where Pedro Pascal takes his helmet off, and some of the slower, those subtler, softer moments in the show that are just as impactful because you have to wait and see how it ends up. Like, those can get lost because everyone focuses on the really big stuff, like something with Stranger Things, because Netflix does the whole binge watch release method most of the time. And they decided the last time they divided Stranger Things into like 2 parts in the last 2 episodes.
Yeah.
But there were different points of the series where the season where there was like no discourse on, social media. There was no discourse on these review shows because everyone focuses on those big moments, and we lose the softer, like, character building stuff that happens along the way. And then we get conditioned as fans to thinking that the character development happens super quick and everything is like action packed and drawn out, when if you really look at every series like slowly through like this like smaller lens, it's like there are a lot of softer moments that happen along the way. For instance, a more recent example, like The Last of Us, and I know that Brian loves The Last of Us. And I'm not good with characters, but the characters with with Offerman's character, and it's just the episode where it's like on there, like that is an episode that
Frank
I
and
think
Bill.
might be the best just individual episode in the season. Like, it's up there. Like, it was just a really great episode. But if you drop, that whole season off at once, there was like a whole week and a half where that episode was being talked about and celebrated, and the people behind it were talked about and celebrated. But if you drop the whole season at once, people are going to be talking about everything with Joel and stuff at the end, and we're going to move on. And it might not be till much later that people come back to that. Like, the discourse is going to end and people are going to move on to the next thing. Like, we're talking about Ventress right now, but if Hunter dies in like 6 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks, Hunter dies and Omega is separated from the batch, are we really going to be sitting here talking about like an Asajj Ventress appearance? Like, we're going to be focusing on the fact that our team just got once again separated, and then we lost another batch member. And so I think it's important that like maybe we can release arcs at once if there are specific arcs.
That's
like
what I was getting ready to say.
But maybe not whole entire seasons, because I think Andor did a good job of releasing 3 episodes of Andor at once, and like this was the arc that we got, like the first arc, and I thought that was like a great way to introduce, because it felt like conclusion to one story moving into the next. So I'm curious, Brian, what do you have to say about that?
No, you stole the words right out of my mouth. I was getting ready to say that, release arcs at a time. But with seasons 1 and 2 of Bad Batch, that's a little harder to do because like we, Nate said last week, it's just the mission of the week kind of episodes, and it's kind of hard to do arcs when every single episode is kind of its own thing. You brought up like The Last of Us. The thing with The Last of Us is every week in every episode, there was a big moment that even if you sat and binged the whole season, those moments would still stand out. and as big moments. Every episode had its own climax. You know what I mean? Like this big, huge jaw-dropping moment, or this really big emotional moment. You know, like the whole Henry and Sam thing. It's in the dead center of the season. Has it has a huge bearing on the last, on the final of it, final.
Right.
But if you had sat and binged it, a lot of people could say, well, that would get lost. But would it though? Because that was such like an emotional moment. If
It
they
wouldn't
had
get lost
more and more
forever.
of that, do what?
I don't think it would get lost forever.
No,
I just
no.
think that like the discourse around it, it wouldn't necessarily be as powerful as it was that week. Where
Right. No, I get it.
And it gets lost in the shuffle because
Everybody
you're
would
going to
end
be
up
talking
focusing on
about
the big
Joel
thing
laying
at the
waste
end,
to
yeah.
everyone to get to get her
Yeah.
out at the end. Like that's what people are going to talk about, and then they're going to start going, "What's going to happen in season 2?" You know what I mean?
Boy, do I have a story for you! What's happening in season 2?
Oh god, I can't wait to be miserable
Oh,
again.
but no, I think I like the idea of arcs. And they do it with, look at comic books, right? They release comic books one issue a month.
Mhm.
And I'm getting to the point where I'm stockpiling comics for a few months, and then I sit down and just read all the way through. Because by the time you wait a month for a 4-minute issue of comics, you've already kind of forgotten what happened last month, and you kind
Right.
of need a refresher and whatnot. And so when they released the TPBs, the trade paperbacks of like 6-issue arcs, that's the way to probably get your comics, to be honest. Sit down and just get
Okay.
the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? And so I like the idea of doing arcs.
It depends on the show. Like it just depends.
does.
It might depend
It
on the
does.
show. I think Andor could have benefited from
It
that.
could have.
I think Mandalorian is perfect as a weekly episode, like an episodic thing. Like
that one would work weekly.
because I'm a big fan of episodic storytelling. Like if you're a Star Trek fan, you're probably a fan of episodic storytelling because
Right.
it seems like, Next Generation was episodic. If you watch Strange New Worlds now on Paramount Plus, it's episodic storytelling.
Mhm.
And so I'm kind of like used to that with an overarching narrative behind it a lot of times. But even with a show like The Batch that's leading towards something as well, there's going to be those like mission of the weeks that we talk about. I like that. But yeah, maybe given the audience nowadays, certain times it's okay to drop arcs, but like I think The Batch has done that. Like in the middle of the season, we had the 2-episode clone, with Rex and everything. Like they were like, we're going to drop these 2 together. I think that it just depends on the show and it depends on the creators. I think one thing we've lost is how, they've devoted these budgets, and the way they've done it is they're only making these 6 to 10 episode seasons now. So everyone feels as if every episode has this extra weight attached to it, because if we don't get the plot now, like, oh my gosh, we wasted a week. And it's frustrating because I think the creatives involved would like that to be stretched out more. The actors have said they would like to have more work, and but it's the studios that are like, no, how about 6 to 10 episodes? And I think they could benefit from doing more episodes, less shows, perhaps. But that's a whole nother, conversation that we could get into. 2 episodes next week. I didn't know that.
Some of the shows I think make sense having a limited number of episodes. Obi-Wan
Right,
Kenobi,
right.
that made sense having just a limited. That made sense. You could probably have cut an episode out of it and it would have been all right.
Right.
That was all right. But you also got to keep in mind too, it's way more expensive nowadays to make these shows than it was back, like Star Trek Generation, New Generation days and stuff. They could sit down and hammer 30 episodes out in no time flat. And just use stock footage of the Enterprise in every episode, so you can't.
We're
not
that long removed from The Walking Dead dropping 16, 18 episodes in a season, though. I mean, it does happen. We see that, and I understand what it's the costs and everything like that. But I mean, Star Wars is pouring their money into how many shows and movies right now. What if we sat and we focus? We're going to tell like quality a narrative story, of something like that, and I think we're seeing that across the board with other places as well. 2 episodes next week. We got a big week of Bad Batch next week. Jay, what are you hoping happens in our 2 episodes next week? What are you anticipating?
I like what you guys said about Pabu. I think that something has to happen there. And hopefully the next, actually, if it is a 2-episode premiere, I'm thinking that might be it.
You think so too, Brian?
Yeah. No, I definitely this last episode, and the last two episodes, because I actually watched the last two episodes last night. I watched last week's and this week's last night. The last couple episodes have done a really good job of showing more of the city there and the citizens, and Crosshair helping the lady going out on the fishing boat, and Wrecker, and everything. And so I think they're really building up to that place just getting wrecked. And I think the bounty hunters, I think next week we're gonna get the Cad Bane. I think that's all gonna be. I think they're coming for Omega.
I think it'd be like
that's
a 2-part episode,
Yeah.
similar to that. I think Ventress, a few things make it seem like Papu's gonna finally, that's gonna
It's
suck.
gonna get wrecked. Yeah.
Is Ventress saying you're not as safe here? That's like the obvious one, but I think one of the other obvious or the points that they made to show us that too was Crosshair finally, like you mentioned, he's helping the woman, and she's like, "Thank you, Crosshair, so much." And then
He's like,
Wrecker's
"Ugh."
like, "You made a friend," and it shows that he's even getting involved
Yeah.
in the village life. And so now every member of the batch has made a home there. Like every member of the batch considers that home, because before, Crosshair was like the guest inside this new area that they called home. And now it's like, oh, Crosshair is contributing to daily life. He's contributing to the village, and he has made himself home. But nonetheless, we'll be here next week on Thursday talking through everything that happens in the next episodes of The Bad Batch, and who knows what other Star Wars is going to come our way this next week. You never know what might pop up. I have to say, I did not anticipate that a Luke action figure would be coming my way in this week. So you never know what might pop up in the Star Wars sphere. Brian, where can we find you?
You guys can find me right here on the Star Wars Newsnet every Thursday night, talking to these yahoos about Star Wars and listening to Jay try to kill off beloved Star Wars characters. You guys can also catch me and Tyler on the Star Wars Timeline Show, the Star Wars Newsnet Timeline Show that's going to release every Monday, 7 p.m. We just got done recording next week's episode tonight before we went live. Going to be talking about some Cataclysm, some High Republic Cataclysm. We are almost out of the first chronological year of Star Wars. We're almost there, like 2 more episodes, and we're finally getting into phase 1. So definitely go check that out. We're having a blast going through the entire timeline chronologically, and talking about all this stuff too, all the High Republic novels, and I'm sure moving on with the other novels and stuff too, some of the the trilogies and the duologies and stuff like that in the canon. It's going to be cool talking about some of these books back to back to back to back to back, and as we go through the timeline. So definitely go check that out. It's always a good time. And actually, I think this week's episode is going to be the longest one we've done so far. I think we even beat last week's episode, Tyler.
It's because we were just gushing over Cataclysm for so long, and we just love that book so much. Like, you can find us every Thursday here on Star Wars News Live. Like Brian said, the Timeline Show is great. You can listen on Spotify and Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also, it's on YouTube every week. And then check out, I put a little video last week. I know that a lot of us are curious about who Vernestra Rowe is from the Acolyte, and we're curious about what the Acolyte's going to be about. So I put this together like a little quick, like 3-4 minute video that kind of dives into Vernestra's backstory, because she's going to be a character to watch out for here soon. So I put a little video together that kind of gives you some of that. And of course, always stay tuned for whatever else we decide to drop here on YouTube. Usually we'll have our 2 shows every week. I'll put together a video and a few shorts for you every single week as well. Stay tuned on Sunday. You'll have Miguel's piece. You saw him in the chat tonight. Miguel's piece on Star Wars Galaxy Far, another week in a galaxy far, far away. It's our weekly like Sunday special that we like to put out on there. So I'll have to take away from watching basketball and always check out Miguel's piece. But Jay, before we get out of here, where can we find you real quick?
Yes, if you guys do like video games, you guys probably have seen some of my decorations up here. I have my own YouTube channel called Good Games Dude. I just uploaded a video on the indie game Chia. It's a really cool hidden gem. So I like to cover, not just the big ones, but also the small ones. Chia is one. I just did that video today, and it's a very personal video about my own childhood in Hawaii and how that video game actually captured the essence of living in the Pacific Islands growing up. But yes, feel free to check out my stuff there. And, you can also just find me here at Star Wars Newsnet. And I am, just really thankful to be on here and to even just talk about my review, because as you guys know, my review definitely made some waves. But
we
it's good to be
marched
here
him
as
out in
always.
front of the masses after that. Started. We were like, "Oh no, you're answering for this."
You must address your crimes.
No, it's a good time. We love talking about Star Wars on here. It's all good. It's
Right.
all fun. We're gonna have a good time every week, and I'm excited to talk about more Star Wars in the future with y'all. And I'm sure we'll have a lot to chew on next week. So for Light and Life, thanks everyone for joining. Please hit like and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next week.